right, good morning everybody and welcome to this meeting of People Scrutiny Committee on the 21st of January. Do I have any apologies for absence? No, okay, so we have Councillor Peter Strong is substituting for Councillor Sue Riley this morning. Okay, any declarations of interest? No, and public open forum, I don't believe we have anybody today. Okay, so we're going to move on to item 4, which is a policy update on the review of the home search policy, scrutinising amendments to the policy. So I'm going to hand over to, I think it's Ian.
Yeah, I'm going to.
Thank you, Ian.
I'm going to start. Yeah, thanks for receiving this report. Just before I do start, it was just really to say that the review is very the report very much is about the allocations review, but what we've done is give it a bit of preamble by way of introduction. We're quite conscious that the committee hasn't received any reports on home search for a little while, so we thought it'd be useful just to give you a little bit of a high level background. But by way of a high level background, it's again we've intentionally not gone into the detail, but hopefully it'll give you a bit of context when we start talking about the actual items that we've reviewed. So do you want to click onto the next one, please, Beck? Thanks. Yeah, so what is Monmouthshire Home Search? Again, just by way of a reminder that the home search policy, the background to it is set in statute. Overall, as a council, we've got a responsibility to identify and monitor the needs, housing need within Monmouthshire. And the actual register actually sits within that wider context. So there's legislation that requires us and every other local authority to have a housing register, and it's a register of qualifying persons, and we're required to have an actual allocation scheme which determines priorities and how we actually allocate accommodation. So that legislation, and there's very firm guidance that we have to work. It's called a code of guidance, which whilst it isn't statutory, it's very well. It might as well be statutory because that's what we're required to follow. But we're required to give preference to certain categories of individuals, and that would include homelessness, medical needs, welfare needs, by way of example. And in certain criteria, we're required to give additional preference. And that's how our banding system that undermines our banding system, and dictates the priorities that we follow through the policy. And we're also required to periodically review the policy to make sure that it is fit for purpose, and that's what today is all about. So next slide, please, Becky. So whilst the home search policy is a waiting list at its most simplistic, it's also a strategic tool, and it's there as a tool to support local priorities. So within the policy, there are items that are in there to support the requirements of the county, probably one of the biggest and most obvious one is homelessness. Obviously, we've got a big homelessness in Monmouthshire. Historically, we've had an issue with homelessness in Monmouthshire, and the policy supports that priority. It's also got wider tools within there, such as trying to keep communities balanced, supporting social care, by way of a couple of other examples. So the register that we've got is a common housing register with a shared allocation policy. Many moons ago, the council had its own waiting list, and the individual housing associations had their own waiting list. We all had different rules, but a number of years ago, that came together as one, and it makes so much more sense. So I can remember the olden days when we had different waiting lists, and it's so much more straightforward and simple, both for us as a council, but also for local residents. So we've got this single and shared approach to a waiting list, and a single and shared approach to how we let the properties. And so within that partnership, we've got ourselves, Monmouthshire Housing, Melin, Pobble, and United Welsh. So the administration of the policy, as you probably all know, is done on our behalf by Monmouthshire Housing. They effectively continued with the register at the point of stock transfer, so they've done it, say, I can't remember how long, it must be 14, 15 years since stock transfer, and that creates a single point of contact for applications and inquiries. But as a service, particularly through the housing options team, we're very involved with the administration of the housing register, and we obviously get contacted quite regularly by applicants or elected members raising queries about people's position on the waiting list. So we operate a choice-based waiting list for allocations, and again, the whole background to that is to operate on a similar to an estate agent. People don't go into an estate agent and have a property pushed on them. They go in and say, I'd like that one, or I'm interested in that one. And that's the principle behind the housing register and having a choice-based lettings. So the theory is people only bid on properties that they want and are interested in. So the way we prioritise is depending on people's circumstances. People are banded according to need, and when a vacancy comes up, the vacancy will be offered in most cases to people in the highest band, and when people share the same band, we use their date of application, or effective date, should I say, rather than date of application, to prioritise. So it's person in the highest band that, in theory, has got the highest effective, the longest effective date. Next spec. So again, just to give you a few stats, we've currently got approaching 4,000 people on the housing register, and of those, 2,000 or so have got a recognised housing need. The reason for the difference is because we have anyone's allowed to go on the housing register, and we do get a lot of people that are interested in social housing, but under our policy they're determined as not having a need. And we get a lot of people that will register, just on on the off chance that they might be lucky, and some people do it as a bit of a contingency. But the focus for us is obviously those 2,000 that are registered as being in need. Last year we had 1,500 applications registered. I don't know what the position so far is this year, but it gives you a feel of the volume that the team have to administer. You know, that demand is obviously really high. And more to the point, the need in Monmouthshire is high. So of those 2,000, you know, we've got approaching 500 people that are in band 1, and approximately half of those are homeless applicants. And again, what we are finding is that the majority of properties that are allocated to people in band 1. So applicants in the lower bands, you know, will struggle to be accommodated, unfortunately. Next then back. So again, just to give you a feeling of the volumes of the number of properties that are available. Again, we're of the view that the volume of properties that are available is quite low, and that's couched in a positive. It's because people in Monmouthshire like the local housing stock. There isn't a great deal of turnover and movement, you know, because the stock is very popular and our communities are popular. So that's a positive, but obviously it's a negative for those people that are in need and are waiting for accommodation. And I say, so, you know, typically last year we had 36 properties advertised in a particular month. And again, when you think about the context of, you know, there's 2,000 people on the register, you know, we've typically had 200 people in temporary accommodation at any one time. And again, just gives you a feel of how short we are of those vacancies coming through. So in terms of this year, to bring you more up to date, there's 234 general needs properties have been let, and 139 of those were let to people with a homeless duty. We had 170 were let last year, so we're on course for probably matching that 170. That equates to 59% of the vacancies at the moment, and we're, as a team, particularly the homeless team, we're in regular contact with the RSLs. You know, we do need more properties for homelessness, obviously trying to minimise our use of B&B. But of course, there is a price to pay for that. So every homeless person that is accommodated, while that's important, that does squeeze the availability of properties for non-homeless people. So, you know, whichever way we go is the wrong way, unfortunately. And homeless people that are currently waiting for accommodation is, at the moment, it's just over 12 months. Obviously that varies depending on whether it's a 1-bedroom need or a 3-bedroom need, and other circumstances in the middle. But typically, you know, most homeless people are now waiting for a property for over a year. Next, please. So I'm going to hand over to Becky after this slide, because Becky has, it's Becky that's been working with the housing associations in terms of reviewing the policy. But I just wanted to give you an introduction to those policy amendments. It's been a relatively light touch exercise in terms of this review. Previously, we've had some quite big reviews and made some major changes, and this review, and again, I think it's probably testament to the work that we've done in the past. We've kept on top of the policy. We tweak and refine it, and we're of the view that it works pretty well. So there hasn't been a great need anyway to do some significant changes to the policy. So they're couched in definitely policy changes that need approval of the council, but others it's housekeeping and tweaking wording so it reads more clearly to applicants when they're reading the policy documents. So, but what we do expect is that the next review of the policy will be driven by legislation. There's currently a homeless white paper out, which is proposing quite, I was going to say radical, but probably significant changes to homeless law, which will impact on the council. And we're anticipating that it will increase the demand for social housing from homeless applicants. So the next review of the allocation policy we expect to be driven by this homeless legislation, and expect it to be some quite big changes. So, as I said, the changes that Becky and the team have been working on is, essentially about making the policy document a bit more easier to use. But some of the main themes of the changes that we've picked up. We've changed financial thresholds where they're applicable. Obviously, costs have risen. We've got inflation, so they need to keep up with reality. The policy needs to support the Armed Forces Covenant, so we've made changes that to make it more accurate. We identified a few areas, and again, these aren't big areas, these are relatively minor areas where we feel the policy can better support the best utilisation of the stock. So there's a few changes there, and there's changes that supports families with children in flats. So they're the main themes, and I say in terms of all those changes, the numbers of people that it will actually impact on the register will be relatively low numbers of people, but nevertheless important to those people that it does affect. So that's my introduction. Hope that's been useful, but I'll hand over to Becky now, who will walk you through the detail.
Thanks, Ian. I don't really think there's much to add, to be honest, to your overview. The amendments proposed are minor. I'm going to stress that it won't have a particularly big impact on the housing register. They have been agreed between MCC and Monmouthshire Housing Association, which is the largest housing association that operate here, and Home Search. So they are yet to be put to the wider partnership group, and that hangs on kind of council approval. So that the partnership group are aware of these changes are being put forward, but they will then agree them and discuss them following our discussions here. Just to stress as well that it is a light touch review, and it's largely because of the expected changes to legislation Ian mentioned in a couple of years, which we think will have quite a significant impact on the allocation policy, so it's likely that we will have to rewrite quite significant sections of it in a couple of years. And as Ian says, it's the changes that are minor are largely due to just closing some gaps that have been identified by ourselves and MHA, making it easier to access and to read for people. It is still quite a large document, I have to be honest. And also to reflect the cost of living crisis that we're currently going through. So a lot of the thresholds have been raised in recognition that people's salaries, people's money isn't going as far as perhaps it used to. So there's going to be greater income needed to sustain accommodation and properties when it comes to things like low-cost home ownership and intermediate rent. We've also upped the threshold of sufficient financial resources to reflect that, so people are now able to earn more or have greater assets before being demoted or taken off the register. And similar with rent arrears, there's been a recognition that private rents are very, very high, and it doesn't take much to fall into arrears that would previously have taken them over the threshold to be demoted from the register. So now, in lieu of that, there's a 4 weeks rent rather than a set amount that's being applied. We refreshed the policy with regards to the Armed Forces Covenant. So we had a look at that just to make sure that we are as best as we can, and as to our knowledge, working with the Armed Forces Covenant and providing the correct support there. That has been done with the AFLO as well. The local AFLO has been involved in our refresh of the Armed Forces Covenant, and we've extended many of the policies to cover the families of those who have served, not just the serving personnel or ex-serving personnel. We have tried to more efficiently utilise stock where we can. So we've got changes with regards to flats, so people who have custody arrangements that means they have children overnight, but not necessarily permanently, can access 2-bedroom properties, but they will be given now equal preference for an above ground floor flat 2-bed property, whereas before it included ground floor, and that had an impact on accessibility. So we really want to keep those ground floor flats for people who might need them for accessibility reasons. So it's just to try and best utilise that stock. We've also had changed the policy very slightly for those who have 2 children under the age of 5 years and who are in a flat with no lift. We've amended it so that those families will retain their Band 1 status until their youngest child turns 5, just as a recognition that it can take quite a long period of time to be rehoused on the register, and so some families were being timed out of that prematurely. So that really is a kind of overview of some of the more significant minor changes, if you will.
Thank you. Thanks. So you can't see it on here, I'm afraid, but that blank number 1 is actually me. So I have a couple of questions to start off with. Unless there's anything you wanted to say at this point? No?
I think just to say that any allocations policy is always managing a huge amount of need with a limited resource and attempting to do so as fairly as possible. And I think this has been a thorough review. Obviously, as Ian has said, when and if further Welsh Government legislation and policy comes through, there may need to be a further review.
Lovely, thank you. So my first question was, we have this weight in Band 1 homelessness increasing from 11.5 to 12.7 months, but I think last time it was mentioned that this was due to a bottleneck around availability of 1-bedroom accommodation. Is that still the same, or other factors involved in this rise?
I think Ian's probably best placed to answer that question.
It does relate to that. The vast majority of people that we've got in temporary accommodation are single people, and we're still living with the legacy of the stock having, a relatively low number of one-bedroom properties. There's also the issue of number of applicants being ready to move on as well. But yes, to simplistically answer your question, that is the reason. Yeah.
Lovely, thank you. Two more for me. I will limit myself to three. So I was looking, you were talking about the policy document being simplified to make it easier to read, but I was wondering if somebody has a learning disability or another support need and those changes to make it easier to read aren't sufficient for them, do we offer them any additional support with that, or are we relying on the hope that they have a social worker to assist them?
It is a very lengthy document, even for people who don't have learning difficulties or English as a second language. And I think that is something that maybe needs to be looked at further down the line. There isn't, that to my knowledge, a specific version of it that would be easy read. But the home search staff are always available to answer any queries and are pretty good at speaking to people if they have any concerns to be contacted. But yes, that is definitely something that I think is, when we come to the next review, which we are expecting to be quite significant, it's something to be looked at.
Lovely, thank you. And then last one from me then. I was just wondering, when we're looking at medical and welfare priority, I think it's kind of fairly intuitive, we can understand kind of effects on health needs, but social welfare I think is a little more vague, and when we look through the welfare priority, I think maybe I would appreciate a working definition. What's this document meaning when it talks about improving or having a detrimental effect on well-being, social well-being?
I think that can be a broad number of circumstances where somebody's current situation is worsening their physical or mental health or that of the well-being of their children. I don't know whether Ian can give us some specific examples.
It's recognising that some households do have needs over and above medical needs. What we will do throughout the policy is liaise with other agencies around those needs. So it is backed up with evidence from partner agencies in relation to those individual circumstances. It's not, I wouldn't say it's massively used, but it is there, should we need it.
Okay, thank you. We will move on now then to Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ian and Becky, for taking us through this review of the home search policy. Just a couple of questions from me, because you seem to have answered quite a number of the ones I had in your presentation. But with regard to the consultees, I just wanted to check to see if armed forces charities who deal with veterans and their families have been consulted with on these changes. I know you mentioned there's been liaison with regard to the covenant, and also the Citizens Advice Bureau for their expertise and experience with those people who face these issues, and in particular for those registering for and using home search. For example, would the financial thresholds, etc., be run past them so that they can also provide feedback? Or are we actually saying that all assistance is provided by the existing contract holders of Monmouthshire Housing Association, Melin, Pobble and United Welsh, and it is their experience with individuals that we rely on for feedback in relation to relevant amendments to this policy?
I think that's a very valid point. Ian, I'll pass that to you.
Yeah, the level of consultation with this, is, to be honest with you, hasn't been, it's not been a full consultation exercise per se, and as I say, it's because it's a relatively small and quick review. But the experience of the team and the ongoing links that we have with agencies will have informed the discussions and decisions and the proposals that have been made with these. The team all the time will get challenges as we're going through with applications, but also they will be familiar with average incomes and other financial areas of relevance. So that has been used to inform the changes. What we do when there is a bigger review, that there would be a full consultation arrangement, but as I say, in this particular instance, we haven't.
Just to add to Ian's point, that at the moment there are changes being mooted, or they might even have been through, I don't know, UK Parliament at the moment with regards to the Armed Forces Covenant and housing, and it is anticipated that that may have an effect in Wales. So having spoken to the AFLO, they are certainly waiting to see potential changes to the way that the covenant is dealt with. So it is a bit like with our pending changes to homelessness legislation, we are expecting changes to the Armed Forces Covenant in Wales when it comes to housing. So we haven't done a full consultation at this time because the changes are so minor, and we've just expanded what was there before to cover the forces in line with the families of the forces, in line with AFLO guidance. But it is anticipated that will also need to change in coming time, as when we change the homelessness legislation.
Can I just add as well? We work closely with. Particularly closely with Mind, who operate welfare benefits services. We've got our own welfare benefits colleagues within the housing support team. So again, that internal knowledge, again from people that are dealing with it on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you. Just one other question. I think Councillor Wright, the chair, mentioned earlier about social workers obviously maybe helping people with their applications, which is a similar question to what I was going to ask as well. And I was just wondering about the use of home search in general and the guidance and support available. I imagine it's quite a daunting task to use if you're not IT savvy. So is the generic support mainly given by Monmouthshire Home Search and, of course, the partners involved in that? Or have outside bodies such as the Citizens Advice Bureau and charities have a greater role to play in the past? Do they get sort of significant training in that area in order to help people?
Want me to answer that? The main areas of support will come from obviously Home Search itself, but we've also got our housing support providers. We've got quite a number of agencies operating under the Housing Support Grant Programme, and many of those applications, many of their clients will be looking for accommodation and needing to move. So all of our support providers are well versed in the policy. We have support provider networks, which is an opportunity to bring them together and obviously update and share any information. We'll do training with them as necessary. We do have close links with Citizens Advice through the on the back of our housing support work. I'm not going to sit here and say that they're receiving a formal arrangements, but probably on the back of your query, it's probably just worth us just touching base with them and just making sure that they are equipped and they are, because it's not a problem supporting them, and they obviously provide an important role in terms of key messages and facilitating assistance for our clients. So we will do that.
Okay, thank you.
And if I can just add, I don't know whether we actually have any statistics about how many housing queries are dealt with through the MCC hubs, but they are also a very important front door for all kinds of housing queries, I think.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Howarth, I'm going to go to Councillor Powell first because she's having problems with the digital hand function. So Councillor Powell.
Yeah, thank you very much. Are there many that slip through the net, the people that are homeless and struggling but don't get picked up by, and they're there in a problem? Do you get many people in that situation? Or do you think you managed to find them all?
I think I'm aware via social media that there are people in our communities who are still sleeping rough. There are, of course, people who we are unable to accommodate for various reasons, whether they have no local connection or are without recourse to public funds. There are also some people who decline an offer of temporary accommodation. So there may be people who are not accessing, who need assistance but are not accessing support to navigate those systems. But I do believe in Mummershire we keep it to a minimum. There are good networks with, for instance, church groups who are often the people who come in and other faith groups who come into contact with people in need. And as I say, people come into our hubs with all kinds of queries and are generally pointed in the right direction. I don't know if Ian wants to add anything.
Thank you.
No, I think you've covered it really. I suppose the answer in part is we don't know what we don't know, but it's certainly there's we make every attempt to to identify people and make it hopefully make it easy for people to access us, and we do occasionally get people that do emerge for whatever reason that we don't know and aren't on the register, but of course obviously as soon as we know them that we start supporting them and getting them filling in applications, etc.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, are you also trying to raise your hand and having problems? Okay, so the same with Councillor Peter Strong. So what I'm going to do, Councillor Howarth, I'm going to come to you next, then you, Councillor Butler, then I will go to Peter Strong, and then I will come to you.
I think Penny was waiting for us.
Oh. Okay, Councillor Howarth.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. Just a couple of quick questions, and it revolves around the allocation side of homes. And An example would be that we have a development with 20% affordable homes. They are offered then to a social landlord, and part of that criteria is local need. And I'm only touching on the local need for the officers and cabinet member on the basis of is I think many members have problems with allocations then, because part of the planning process, which is important, is local need. Generally, we find that we may sway to give a development to go ahead on basis on local need as well for the affordable homes. How do we flag them homes up? Because I and many councillors probably spend many hours trying to speak with people on the system isn't fair, why have they got this property before for me because they don't live local, etc., etc., etc. That does happen. How are these homes flagged on the register as local need first, i.e. before anybody else, and they're not required then locally? So somebody wants to upgrade from a 2-bedroom to a 3-bedroom locally, and then the 2-bedroom comes free, and then somebody local who's on the register who has issues, etc. How do we flag them properties up? Because there must be quite a lot out in the system there in the last probably 10 years reference to planning. And then where does this all come in then to, I have a development in my area where you won't be able to access that development, and it is Cod Equal. Everybody knows Cod Equal in Gilman, unless you're over 50. So how does that come into the Equalities Act then when, when you're classed as old, is it over 50? And actually, when we are in a serious criteria out there, because I know lots of people who actually have sold properties and actually gone into developments because they're over 50. I just find it quite patronising that we actually say that we don't have enough properties out there, but we've got people who are offloading properties and then moving into associations' developments. Then that brings to my final point is, why is it Monmouthshire Housing? Do we think that because they seem to be the major player for us as an authority because of the housing stock transfer all them years ago, which I was involved in? Why is it that, rumour has it, that they're running 2 companies? They run a letting basis company, and we're working with them on delivering need, which is quite valuable out there. And lastly, I thank you all for your time, Ian. You've been there many years, and the hard work that you guys do out there it's not easy. We all recognise that it's not easy, and trying to please everyone's not easy. But I do personally thank you and your team for your efforts in delivering for the people of Monmouthshire. Quite a very awkward and delicate portfolio there. Thank you, Chair.
Want me to answer those? Your first question. I assume there you're talking about the rural allocation policy. Is that right, Sam? So I mean, those properties, any properties that come up through the rural allocation policy, which are they're newer properties, and they are. They're ring fenced deliberately to local people. So there is a criteria around that, and there's a criteria for prioritising, and that's embodied within the policy and the guidance as per the wider register. And when those properties become vacant, or ready to let, they're advertised as normal through the through the register. So I think there's probably there is normally a little bit of additional promotion around around social media, obviously, on the fact that that they've been built and they're available, and that's probably a bit of a marketing exercise. And also sometimes we've got the rural housing enabler that may be linked in as well. David James, obviously, has got quite close links. So, but the main promotion area is through the home search website. With regards to the likes of Coed, I think again, I think what you have got is a policy that's always been very supportive of older people in Monmouthshire, and I think that's obviously completely appropriate. Obviously, Coed is treated slightly different, as a number of properties across the county, allowing for younger older people to move in, and again that's all around making sure that there's no empty properties and it's fully utilised. But I think the core of your query is again around supporting older people and making sure that we that need is recognised within that. Sitting here now, I'd probably need to go away and look at that in detail to really to make sure that I fully understand your query in relation to the existing policy. But that's the headline response really. It's still needs based, and it's on the back of the council's long-term support of older people. And then lastly, your query about MHA is that about capsule that you're referring to? So Monmouthshire Housing obviously is a standalone organisation in itself, and it has set up Capsule, which is an arm's length company. That company, as I understand it, was set up to generate additional income for the main organisation, and that Capsule targets intermediate and market need. I believe it does make an income, and that income therefore goes back into the organisation and effectively, strengthens their bottom line. The setup that MHA have got in terms of Capsule is not unusual. That's quite common practice across many housing associations across the country. So I don't know the detail, but that's my understanding of it. It's to support their income.
Chair, can I just follow on from a couple of the points the officer made there? So going back to Capsule, does that then say that actually our housing partners are taking properties off the market, which are quite valuable out there, and putting them into their system where they may be on the marketplace, which would give the opportunities for many to move up the ladder, which then frees up other properties, which I think is one of my criticisms I have of that, because we have quite a lot of properties out there, but their portfolios will be quite large as well, which does cause a problem. And then the allocation, the rural allocations policy, I think it's the flagging up of it, because I believe if you're not on, if you're in a property and you think, well, we're managing here, and then next door but two to you comes up on the marketplace, on the register, you might even not know about it. So you think, well, I'll get out of my 2-bedroom. I'm desperate for 3-bedroom, but I'm not even on that. And that's where the problem lies. Is it should it not be actually, do they advertise it as local option first? I don't know how they do it there, and that's where my query lies, where I have lots of issues with that within the rural allocations policy. Does it come up on the system as local need first, which I don't think it does. I don't think it does. I don't think it flags up when it's advertised local need only, and after that then it's criteria then from the rest. So anybody who wants to come from Abergavenny, let's say to Gilwan, to I don't know, Mamet or Timauer, if that property is advertised, it's not advertised as local need first, and that's because a lot of people probably don't understand we have a rural allocations policy. I think it's a crossover for me in between the two. That's all I want to say on it, Chair. Thank you.
Sorry.
No, you go first.
I was going to say we have a choice-based letting system which relies on people being registered and bidding. Anybody can register for email alerts. It is clearly, on the listing that something may have a local connection priority or rural priority. But if people aren't registered and they're not bidding, they will lose out to somebody who is registered and is bidding. And I'm afraid it's you have to be in it to win it. Really, so and that is how the system works. So if somebody is looking for a transfer, I think the best advice to even if they would only be looking at a very small number of properties, the advice has to be to them to keep that constant eye on, register for alerts, and make sure that when a suitable property comes up, that they do bid for it. With regards to the shared ownership on some of the rural sites, that is now being advertised on the open market, on some of the home for sale websites. I'm not sure whether it's Rightmove or some of the others, because we acknowledge that some of the people who may be in need of those shared ownership properties may not be bidding for social rented housing. And of course with the older people's properties, there we've got a situation that has arisen historically, because the older people's properties were, I think I'm correct in saying, excluded from right to buy. So therefore we still have older people's social rented properties, whereas a lot of the family homes were purchased under right to buy.
I was also just going to add about Capsule. Obviously, I don't know the figures in terms of Capsule, what their kind of stock is or their housing stock, but just to stress that there is a need in Monmouthshire for housing tenure of all types, and that includes market rent availability. So yes, I get the point that them having private rented properties could be seen in one way as holding stock that's not available to the housing register, but there is a shortage of private rent in Monmouthshire as well, and open market rents. So there is a place for private rented property also, is what I was just going to add.
I know that MHA did a presentation to councillors I think in a couple of years ago now. I'm sure they would be happy to do a further presentation.
Lovely. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation so far and the answers from the Cabinet member. I've got some queries really about the suspensions and demotions policy procedure. I can understand it's necessary to demote or suspend people. And my question really is how successful these sanctions are. Do people then pay up and go back up the ladder, or what happens to people who might actually drop off, as it were? Are there permanent suspensions? What happens to them? So those are my two questions. Thank you.
Do you want me to answer that?
Answer that in.
There you go.
I was just going to say with demotions, there is support that's often in place. So if someone is identified as being suspended or demoted, they are offered support to rectify the issues for which they've been demoted. Very often it's rent arrears, but it can be due to behaviour as well. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head how successful we are at reinstating people on the register, but it does happen. And there are kind of ways that Home Search and us, as staff and HSG supported services, will work together to try and get that person back on the register, whether that's through repayment plans or just through other linking in with other services. So there is work that goes on behind those demotions. I don't know if Ian has any further to add.
Yeah, just to add to that, again, it's the ability to do that is enshrined within the guidance. It's the policy and the practice is absolutely not meant to be a punishment, and it's all about supporting individuals. Again, the wording in the guidance is tenant-like behaviour. So it is meant to be a positive arrangement. I think the other thing to say is that our practice, it shouldn't be a blanket practice. So everybody's circumstances need to be taken into account. And it's not about necessarily clearing the whole of the arrears. So somebody could still get an allocation if they are in arrears, but they've been able to demonstrate that they are able and willing to pay, every week. And your question about permanent exclusion, again, that shouldn't happen. The only thing I would say is what is permanent, because obviously you get some people that are more proactive than others in terms of addressing their demotions. So you do get some people that will be longer than others. From a homeless perspective, it is important for us as a team that we are supporting people that are demoted, because you could have somebody in temporary homeless accommodation that could just sit there on and on and on without that being addressed, and then obviously that's got an impact on us as a homeless service. So it's in our interest to support those tenants as well.
Great, thank you. Councillor Peter Strong.
Thank you, and sorry for mucking up the running order earlier. I was actually pressing the wrong button. But there we go. Speaking as Armed Forces champion, picking up on some of the points from earlier, I was in fact very pleased to see the changes that you had made. They certainly enhance the provision for the Armed Forces community, and clearly you had worked with the AFLO, that's the Armed Forces Liaison Officer, who is in close contact with lots of the military charities. I wanted to ask, do you have figures to show how many members of the Armed Forces community that you've dealt with over the last year or whatever period? And do you deal with enough to pick up any sort of pattern as to reasons for homelessness or housing need amongst members of the Armed Forces community? Is it mainly single guys who are, or is it perhaps families who have been subject to no-fault evictions after having been in rented property for a while? I don't know if you deal with enough to actually pick up a pattern on that. Thank you very much.
Unfortunately, I don't have any figures to hand with regards to Armed Forces personnel and Home Search, but I can certainly get those, and it would be interesting to look at the reasons for homelessness. I feel that they probably fall into our overall kind of homelessness figures, but I can definitely have a look into that with Home Search.
Yes, thanks. That would be very interesting. Also, to keep us posted with these possible changes that are coming about in the Covenant going through Westminster Parliament at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to thank you for the report, which is detailed and very informative, but I just want to know what are the biggest differences this review update will make in terms of outcomes to your department. Thanks.
Yeah. Going back in. Okay. I think in the grand scheme of things, there'll be relatively little change, as Becky and I said earlier. The changes are very minor, and the changes that we are making aren't going to affect a large number of applicants. So yeah, I think probably between now and the next review, we won't see a great deal of change or a great deal of impact on either us or applicants as a whole. I think I would say I do think this is because I do think we're not far off the policy being as fit for purpose as it could be.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. So it's simplified and it's working well. That would indicate. So that's a good.
I believe so. And the last review that we did a couple of years ago was quite a big one. We did a lot of work, or I say we, the team did a lot of work around technological side of things to make it easy for people to apply using the phones and everything. So that was a very big change. It took actually quite a long time to implement. So we are living with the benefits of that previous review.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jackie Strong.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a couple of very brief questions, if I may. I know when we were discussing this the last time, we talked about, I'm sure we talked about recognising that the vast majority of people that are homeless are single people, but that there were some families and they were obviously spending less time in homeless sort of accommodation than the other single people. But can you just sort of clarify that for me? The other thing is, I'm really in the same way as the Armed Forces Covenant. It's good to see that you've actually put in some bits about care experience people. Obviously, as a council, we've taken that on board to support our care leavers into adulthood and the support that they require. So I was really pleased to see that. And then I know that we've discussed this before within this committee. From my previous experience as a social worker elsewhere, it was really disheartening when people move out of houses that have been adapted to see all that equipment ripped out, other families or other people put in, and then we have to then spend additional funds actually putting that back somewhere else. So can we have some reassurances that the purpose-built accommodation or adapted accommodation is actually used for other people requiring it? So thank you.
Let's go again.
Well, I was just going to say, I think the big change over the last couple of years is not that yet that we have more social rented housing to offer to people who need it. There is that coming through, but in the growing number of properties that we have available for temporary accommodation, so fewer people are in bed and breakfast, but people are still spending a very long time in other temporary accommodation. But I'll hand over to Ian for.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Councillor Strong, in terms of single people generally waiting longer than families. What we have benefited from, particularly over the last year, Welsh Government have made available funding called TACP, Transitional Accommodation Capital Programme Grant, and our housing association partners have been pretty proactive at looking to use that and have purchased open market properties. The issue that we've had with that is that in a lot of these newer developments, like Maybe Bridge, for example, Vinegar Hill, it's family accommodation that's been built. So our position for families is actually relatively healthy as we sit here, which is good news for families and obviously particularly children. So there is that ongoing challenge for us in terms of that single person's accommodation. Your point about care experience, I said earlier that the policy is there to support wider priorities. Care experience is absolutely one of those priorities, and we do work closely with children's services, and there's always that opportunity. We can always look at, and always will look at, the policy if it can. If there is anything that we can support social care with any changes. So that's an ongoing opportunity. And around accessibility, that the practice that you refer to, I'm not aware of that these days. Certainly, I know that those situations happened in the past. Particularly, I know it's quite. It wasn't unusual for like a shower to be removed and replaced with a bath, because and again, I know from experience when I was in housing management, I know families generally did prefer a bath rather than a shower, and quite often the shower was probably quite institutional, that we used to install, which is again doesn't happen now. So I think we can be we're confident that our stock of adapted property and accessible property is growing all the time. Still not enough though, but yeah, it is increasing.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've just got one small follow-up from something that Councillor Butler raised. When we are looking at people who've been suspended or demoted, if it is due to rent arrears and they are evicted from a private rental because of substantial arrears, do we then treat them the same as somebody with a no-fault eviction? Are they, do we then have a duty to them with a homelessness need?
Yes. That's the short answer. The more nuanced answer is it depends on the nature of those rent arrears. So if we have somebody who has come to us with significant rent arrears and we do a financial check and it turns out they have more than enough in the bank that they could have paid them, then there could be an argument for someone being found intentionally homeless because they have the resources but they have chosen not to use them. If we have somebody who approaches us, which is more likely, with arrears that have built up and they don't have, or we can't say that they have the financial resources to have covered those rent arrears, then that property would have been deemed to be unsuitable due to financial reasons. So they would then be treated, generally speaking, as a homeless household that have become homeless, and that a duty would be issued. That's obviously a very basic overview, and there are nuances within that, and I'm sure if my colleagues were here they'd be able to give you a more kind of thorough answer, but generally speaking, if someone's in rent arrears because they generally can't afford the rent, they would be treated as other homeless households.
Great, thank you.
Would I be right in saying that the demotions are generally due to rent arrears to a social landlord rather than to a private landlord?
I couldn't confidently say either way. I don't think there's also antisocial behaviour as well that comes into it.
Lovely, thank you. I'm just going to go through what I think are the follow-up actions from the conversations we've had. So Rebecca and Ian, you are going to come back to Councillors Peter Strong and Councillor Edwards with some further information around the Armed Forces Covenant and details of why veterans are presenting as homeless and who that group is. Are they single people? Are they families? And we are awaiting some further information based on UK parliamentary legislation changes. Okay, good. Somebody, I'm not sure, I think maybe it was you, Ian, is going to follow up with our partner agencies to make sure that they're sufficiently briefed to give assistance to people using Home Search. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, citizens advice.
Great. And Ian, I think you also are going to come back to Councillor Howarth on rural allocation policy and some more information about Capsule. Is that correct, Simon? Yeah, you're nodding. Good. And lastly, I have that somebody's going to invite MHA back to us to give us an updated presentation, since the last one was a couple of years ago. So in an all-member seminar, I'm guessing. Lovely. Councillor Powell.
Sorry, can I just come back a bit talking about Mr. Strong? I went to an all-day seminar down in Cardiff because I'm the representative on the town council as he is on the county. Recently I've been to a couple of them, and the last one I went to was dealing quite a lot with this, making sure they had somewhere to live as well as getting work for them, and it was a very interesting, and it seemed there was a lot of help there going for the people that left the armed forces, and it was, you know, so they are getting quite a bit of help from that side as well. So I thought you would like to know that.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, item 5, councillors. We have our forward work programme and action list, which I think you all have. Somebody commented it was looking a bit sparse. Now, there's something I would like added to this, the forward work programme, which is I would like this committee to have a look at where things are up to with the Tudor Street building, now that a lease has been granted to The Gathering, who recently obtained charity status, to see how things are progressing and what the expectations from MCC's point of view and from their point of view are.
I wanted to, in the light of the council actually agreeing to become more age-friendly and get the WHO age-friendly status, whether we could have the relevant officers to our next meeting, or you know, sort of to actually explain where we are with getting the status, but actually how it actually impacts not just, you know, the tick box thing, but actually how it impacts policy and how we do things more sort of at grassroots level as well. So that would be my plea, please. Thanks.
Looking around for any more items? Nope. Okay, so we're noting Cabinet and Council Planner. So the minutes of the previous meeting on the 25th of November, can anybody propose those? Or would anybody like to amend them in any way?
Sorry, do you want?
Yeah, lovely. So we've accepted those. Right, councillors and others. So our next meeting is Tuesday the 18th of February at 10 a.m.
just to say that I've sent out an action list and all of the questions and answers that you raised at the last meeting. So yeah, it's quite detailed. So if there's any further questions, then come back to us. But just to keep an eye out for that. Also, I think Councillor Howarth raised this morning that he'd like an email sent to everybody with the dates of the budget scrutiny meetings. That's been done. So if you want to ask questions and you want to participate in the meeting, then just email me and we can send you the links. But if you just want to observe it, then I've showed you how you can access that and watch it online. Okay, thank you.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much, everyone, and thank you for your time, officers, and for your presentation, Ian. Thank you.